Okay, so let's now talk about the VB, Visual Basic version of the script task. Same video as the C Sharp, so no need to really watch them. Really very little difference here. So let me go ahead and give us a project to work from here. We'll just use a plain old integration services package with a script task. When we start it up, you can see the default language is that nasty old C Sharp, the one with all the curly braces and the semicolons, right? So you're going to have to change the language. I can't tell you how many times I've come in, I've left it alone as the default because it was Visual Basic was the default in 2005. Clicked the edit script button. I see the C Sharp and I go, oh, and I close it out, and then notice you cannot change it. Once it has generated that template, you can't change it. So just if you do that, and you will, just delete your script task, drag it back over here. And I've actually done it twice to where I hit the edit script button and go, oh, come on, Scott. Um, and then come back and choose your correct language there. And then once you do that, it actually extracts the VB version of the template, and you get your pretty nice little set here. Okay, well, forget about this for the time being. We don't need that. Let's start back over here. So let's talk about this entry point that you see here. The entry point is called main. Now, what does that mean? This means that when you launch the script task, or when SSIS launches the script task, it's going to run the method called main. Now, the main method can be called anything that you want. It doesn't have to be called main. Main has a bit of history in software engineering. The main method is the first method executed in a C++ application, or it used to be. I don't know what C++.net is even like here. So there's a bit of a history. There's really no reason for you to go through changing that. It would kind of be silly to change it unless you had multiple methods that you needed to make a decision for later on. Let me give you an example. Let me get my pen here. This is actually a real world example that I've used several times. We have a package here, and our package, let's just call it SSIS export to text and upload. And so it's a fairly simple idea. So we run a data flow task to export data to a text file. We zip it up, and then we FTP it. Okay, so we send it somewhere. Now you might be wondering, well, where's my script task? I don't really see how that plays into it. Well, your script task could come in, really could do all three of these. Um, Most likely what you would have in a case like this, you'd probably have like a data flow to do the export. And then you'd have, we did the zip, 7-zip. So we would use an execute process task, and we would pass all of that to 7-zip. Of course, you could use the compression algorithms. You could use any of the compression in Visual Basic, or you could buy third-party libraries to do it, or download open source ones. And then you'd use some type of an FTP, right? That would be your typical flow. The challenge is that the FTP task in SSIS does not do everything that you probably want it to do. It's a really good task, but there are sometimes a few features that you might be missing. For example, you might actually have different situations you have to handle. So for the FTP, let's say that we put in a script task. And depending on the need, the script task has to run one of several methods. So if it's a standard plain old FTP, you've got a method called internet FTP that you want to execute. And it just logs into an FTP site, does a passive transfer, etc. However, you might need to do a secure FTP. So this is an SFTP. And that's something that the FTP task does not support, by the way. Or that's going to be a different method in our script task. Or you might just have a network directory. So you have a backslash backslash server slash file name, etc. So the script task would actually be a better choice to do the FTP in this case than the FTP task. Remember, the FTP task cannot handle SFTP. It's also not that flexible. You could do whatever you want in Visual Basic. You could code it up and do anything you need to. So what we would do in a case like this is we could have a single script task that has three methods in it. Has one called Internet FTP, one called SFTP, one called Network. And depending on what we needed to do, we could tell it which method to load on startup. What is the entry point for the script task? Now, the contrast for this, just to make sure you understand, I'm going to make another one here. I'm going to use another data flow task up here. So here's our data flow task, and here's an execute process task to do 7-zip. And okay, so now coming out of 7-zip, we could have a script task. It's a little big. We could have a script task 1 to do our plain old internet. Then we could have another script task that would do our SFTP. And then we'd have a different script task to do our network. And instead of these being precedence constraints, we could make these expressions, right? So the expression, maybe we have a variable, a package variable that tells us what type of transfer this is. And so we could use an expression to say, if the type of transfer is a network, I want you to use script task 3. So which one do you want? And each of these script tasks, by the way, you just have a main entry point. So which one is more elegant to you? Having one script task in which you change the entry point depending on what your variable is, or having 3 script tasks and you just use an expression precedence to change it? Then use that one. I mean, whichever one makes the most sense, use that. In this simplistic example, performance probably wouldn't have really mattered. It would really be more of a code maintenance and management issue. Which one that you like? I would like the more compact one. I would like the single script task. But it just seems more compact. I can be in there and working in everything, and it just seems far better to me. Your choice, not a challenge at all. Okay. So that's really the one case that I would change the entry point. If I do change the entry point, by the way, let's just change this to my keyboard, because I'm actually looking at my keyboard when I type that. If I hit the edit script, when we come down here, you will see it does not actually change that name. Main stays the same. So if I were to run this now, I'm going to actually get a failure because it's going to say in the output, it cannot find the entry point. It's invalid. Okay? So we get a failure. If, though, I come back over here, go to my keyboard, come back to edit script, come down here, change this, close out, and run it. Now it's going to work fine. I mean, there's nothing really difficult about it. It's just nice to have somebody walk you through, what is this? How does it work? When would I use it? And that's, I think, all you really need to know about the entry point side. Oh, the one thing that you might want to change, you can, in an expression, notice that the property name is entry point. So you could actually do this in an expression. You could say, in the entry point, I want to load up the main method, for example. So it's not going to load up my keyboard now, and we're going to get an error because there is no main method. And so again, it gives us that script point is invalid. Excuse me. Okay. So come back over here. It remembers what the expression told it to do. So I'm going to go back and make this main. Get it green. and then let's come back and talk about what else was done here. Okay, so back over here in my edit script. You are cool deleting the comments. I usually will leave them in there, but feel free to use them. They do offer some good hints on what to do. I always remove the add code here bit. It kind of just makes it a little more compact for you if you want to do that. Like I say, sometimes I'll delete the comments, sometimes I won't. I always remove that add your code bit. I think that's kind of a little silly. It's good that it's in here, but it would be silly for somebody to add real code without deleting that, I think. Up at the top up here are your imports directives. So if you later down here in your main you wanted to work with a string builder class, for example, I'm doing my C# stuff. The string builder class is actually not showing up here. So I get the little blue squiggly line. I can come up here and I can bring in the system.text namespace, and then instantly the string builder shows up. If I'm doing this as a single time thing, I might just come down here instead of using an imports directive and just fully qualify it, doing it that way. For something like that, there's not going to be a performance difference. It's just however you want to do it. This right here, I kind of make a show of explaining it, but it doesn't really matter. You can delete it, and trust me, I'm going to come back and show you what this actually does. And I can say 0. And when I run this, it's going to run successful. If I change this to 1, for example, then this is the code for fail. So 1 means failure. And so now it's going to fail. And when we look at the output, you can see the script returned a failure result. It's because I put in a 1. I'm going to delete this because I want to go back to our auto-generated code. Choose VB. What the task does is the task has to return whether or not the code was successful or whether it failed or not. And a 0 means success and 1 means failure. Now, how do I know that? Well, it's not from digging through the documentation. You can see that we are returning to the SSIS package the results of an enumeration script results. And it defines success up here. So let me delete our comments. You can see that right here, script results is being referenced right there. And success is actually defined right here. And so it equals the success property of the DTS exec result, which if I come up here and I put my mouse over, you can see that a successful result equals 0. I hope that shows up well. If not, that sure does. And same thing for failure. Failure is going to equal 1. So you can bypass this, or you can call this potato if you want. And then you're going to get a squiggly line here. And now you need to say dot potato. That's really it. I would never change those. I've never needed to change the enumerator, but I just wanted to make sure you understood what's going on here. This does work. We say OK, and it will return success because it returns a 0. You don't even have to use enumerations. You can use traditional variables. So you could say, dim success equals 0, and then you could just say I want to return success. It's silly, I know. Okay, I'm just showing you to make sure you understand what's going on in here. I would not change any of the partial public class bit. You're probably going to start getting some errors if you do. About the only things that I would change, I might delete my comments. Let me delete this and come back to the auto-generated code here. And I did my C sharp. So about the only things that I would delete in the real world, I'd probably delete my comments. Um, I would do that, and then I'm ready. And that's it. I'd just leave it at that.